You're listening to Audiology. Support this channel by becoming a member and be sure to submit your requests for topics in the comments below. In Consequences of Hostilities Between the States, also known as Federalist No. 8, Alexander Hamilton delves into what might happen if the United States wasn't united and states ended up fighting each other. This essay, part of the influential Federalist Papers, first appeared in the New York Packet on November 20th, 1787, published under the pen name Publius, a name used for all the essays in the series. Hamilton wrote it to address those who were against having a national army, arguing that without unity, states would have no choice but to form their own standing armies. He warned that these armies could threaten people's freedoms and lead to tyranny. Instead, Hamilton proposed that a single national army would be more manageable. A unique point he made was about geography. He explained that while the ocean kept the United States safe from European invaders, it wouldn't stop conflicts between the states themselves. These arguments were further explored in later essays, from Federalist No. 24 to No. 29. Since Hamilton made his case with Federalist No. 8, his prediction that America would be generally secure from invasions has held true. And notably, the US went on to establish a permanent standing army after World War II, embracing the concept of a unified national military that Hamilton advocated for. Publius begins by discussing his view that conflicts between American states could significantly impact ordinary people, potentially even more severely than wars in Europe. He argues this is because the states lack comparable defensive measures, such as substantial walls or professional soldiers ready for their protection. He believes this absence of security might compel states to compromise their freedom for the sake of safety. Publius emphasizes an important aspect. Although the new constitution proposes the formation of a national army, he's of the opinion that without unity among the states, each is likely to establish its own military force. According to him, this could set them on a course towards oppressive, authoritarian governance, similar to the situation in Europe. Next, Publius makes a connection between the states and the ancient Greek republics, noting how these republics managed their internal affairs without the need for permanent military forces despite their frequent disputes. Nevertheless, he observes that the present era, characterized by technological advancements and the nature of contemporary warfare, has rendered the concept of relying solely on citizen militias for defense almost obsolete. He proceeds to compare two hypothetical countries, one that, due to frequent invasions, maintains a large military force at the potential expense of its citizens' freedoms, and another that is seldom invaded, thereby necessitating a smaller military that is less likely to endanger personal freedoms. Publius contrasts the states with Great Britain, recognizing how Britain largely avoids despotic governance primarily because it is an island, geographically isolated from the rest of Europe, thus obviating the need for an extensive standing army. He concludes his argument by stating that the United States could benefit from a similar strategic advantage as Great Britain, but only if the states stay united. If they choose to separate, he cautions, they would effectively become adversaries, exposing themselves to all the perils associated with division. Alexander Hamilton was the author behind Federalist No. 8, and like the rest of the Federalist Papers, he used the pen name Publius when it was published. The goal of these papers, including No. 8, was to clarify the details of the United States Constitution and convince New York to ratify it. This particular paper first appeared in the New York Packet on November 20th, 1787. The following day, it was also featured in both the Daily Advertiser and the Independent Journal. In Federalist No. 8, Hamilton continues from where Federalist No. 7 ended, arguing that remaining united as a country provides better protection for the state than if they were separate. Up until this point, the Federalist Papers had not really addressed the contentious topic of maintaining a permanent national army. Critics of the proposed constitution were concerned that such a force could pose a threat to the state's sovereignty. In Alexander Hamilton's time, it was a common belief in political thought that bigger, more centralized governments tended to engage in war more frequently. Though aware of the potential dangers posed by a permanent army, Hamilton didn't give much weight to those who opposed having one. He was convinced that such an army would remain faithful to the people who would inherently resist using it for conflict against their own states. Hamilton framed the debate as choosing between a risky option and certain failure, arguing that the dangers associated with a standing army were outweighed by the risks of not having one at the national level. He believed not uniting under a central government would perpetually expose states to conflict. Specifically, he thought wars between states would be catastrophic because the states lacked their own defenses and permanent armies, leading to widespread plunder and destruction during conflicts. This, in turn, would push each state to build its own fortifications and raise armies, resulting in those military forces becoming more intertwined with society than if they had been established nationally. Hamilton also drew comparisons between modern warfare and that of ancient Greece. He pointed out that, unlike the ancient Greeks who could temporarily step away from their daily jobs to serve as soldiers, modern economic commitments and the complexity of contemporary warfare made it impractical for today's citizens to do the same. He observed that the ancients were also pulled from their professions to fight, whereas a modern standing army allows professionals to continue their careers uninterrupted. Additionally, Hamilton cautioned against the societal elevation of professional soldiers, fearing it could lower the status of ordinary citizens. In one of his Federalist papers, number 8, Hamilton highlighted the importance of modern industry to society and acknowledged that its growth enabled technological advancements in warfare. He revisited themes from earlier papers, arguing that America's advantageous position was either a stroke of luck or the result of divine intervention. Furthermore, Hamilton's thoughts echoed the philosophical underpinnings of thinkers like Thomas Hobbes and John Locke, who advocated for unification under a central government for collective defense. In Federalist No. 8, Hamilton described a vicious cycle where war leads to stronger military forces, which then pave the way for authoritarian rule, showcasing his concerns about governance and the protection of individual rights. In Federalist No. 8, Alexander Hamilton made a case about geography's role in America's future, echoing earlier points by John Jay. Hamilton was convinced that the United States had a geographical advantage because it was far from other countries. He worried that if the states split up into multiple nations, this edge would be lost. Hamilton feared splitting up would make the states just like European nations, constantly at odds with each other. He pointed out that Great Britain, thanks to its island status, managed to stay out of many European conflicts. This isolation helped Britain avoid the need for a large permanent army, which Hamilton believed could threaten freedom. He highlighted that peace in Britain was relatively new, only achieved after England and Scotland united in 1707 to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. Hamilton believed that if the United States stayed united, it could avoid the endless conflicts seen in Europe. However, if the states became separate entities, they would end up surrounding each other as enemies. His reasoning had echoes in the work of the 19th century political thinker Alexis de Tocqueville, who also looked at American democracy but didn't delve into what might have been if the states hadn't come together. Moreover, Hamilton tried to calm those against the idea of a standing army by suggesting that the slim chance of an invasion meant the United States could maintain a relatively small military force. In a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton laid out his arguments for having a permanent army from Federalist No. 24 to No. 29. Later on, in Federalist No. 41, James Madison reiterated Hamilton's point that being geographically isolated was beneficial for both Great Britain and the United States. Madison also revisited Hamilton's caution about the risk of losing freedom, but this time he applied the warning to the concept of justice instead of safety in Federalist No. 51. Contrary to these arguments, the Anti-Federalist Papers challenged the idea presented in Federalist No. 8 by opposing the idea of establishing a national standing army as the new Constitution proposed. However, once the Constitution was adopted, it was quickly amended to include the Bill of Rights. This important addition secured the right of citizens to have weapons and allowed states to form their own militias through the Second Amendment, while the Third Amendment prohibited soldiers from being housed in private residences without the homeowner's consent. Hamilton's theories weren't just theoretical. He argued that the unique position of the United States made it less vulnerable to invasion, a claim proven during the War of 1812. His fears about internal conflict leading to war became a reality with the American Civil War. He also spoke of the army as though it was a privileged group, which today might parallel the admiration and respect given to military members for their valor and heroism. The perception of a standing army has evolved significantly since the Federalist Papers were written, whereas Hamilton and his contemporaries viewed such an army with skepticism, fearing it might undermine freedoms. Today's perspective often sees military strength as essential for preserving those very liberties. Following World War II, America established a powerful permanent military and entered into international alliances, like the North Atlantic Treaty Organization and the United Nations, that sometimes include military support. The US has engaged its military abroad to ostensibly protect democracy and ensure its own security through these mutual defense agreements. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more content.